Everyone entered the meeting room expecting a routine hearing. Nothing surprising, but that morning the atmosphere was unusual, as if something was about to happen. A subtle wave of tension creeping through the room as Greene calmly presented the documents. Her composure only highlighted the sudden shift on the other side. Representative Jasmine Crockett, usually sharp and confident, began to visibly falter. She switched to a defensive stance, her eyes wavering, her expression tense, as if caught. Off guard, chairs shifted. The room fell silent as Greene prepared to speak, before diving into the story comment where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. C-SPAN was broadcasting live AIDS phones, lit up, and reporters in the back row scribbled hurriedly. Most thought this was just another hearing, rehashing familiar arguments. But Greene had prepared something entirely different. A carefully calculated attack. Greene adjusted her posture, took a deep breath, and leaned toward the microphone. The room suddenly went quiet. "Mr. Chairman," and she began, her voice calm but sharp, "I wish to address a serious abuse of public trust by a member in this chamber." The atmosphere shifted. All eyes turned to her, cameras zoomed in. Greene didn't flinch. "I'm referring to Representative Jasmine Crockett." Greene continued, her tone steely, and a series of financial irregularities that demand public scrutiny. Specifically, campaign funds have been diverted to personal interests through 2 shell organizations in Texas. A murmur spread through the room. Crockett leaned forward, her eyes locked on Greene. Crockett's hands, initially clasped, began to clench. "You're just spewing nonsense," she shouted across the table. Greene didn't blink. "I have evidence, not rumors," she replied, holding up a thin stack of documents. "I'd like to present it without interruption." The chairman banged the gavel order. "The representative may continue." Greene turned the first page, her voice steady but weighty. "According to Federal Election Commission records, nearly $100, 000, from campaign funds was transferred to a consulting firm called Loniar Solutions, which doesn't even have a verifiable address." She paused, letting the information sink in. Crockett fidgeted in her seat. "That's a legitimate company." "You know it?" she shot back, her voice sharp. "I don't know," Greene responded, glancing briefly at Crockett. "Because after 3 calls, 2 disconnected phone numbers, and a public records request, I still couldn't find anyone associated with this company in that moment." Everything changed. Aides exchanged glances. A young one, barely in their 20s, typed frantically on a tablet. The room's atmosphere grew stifling behind the podium. A cameraman whispered to a colleague, and social media posts began to spread. Greene sensed the shift, but didn't pause. "Furthermore," she said, flipping to the next page, "there's a reimbursement claim for a trip to Austin, Texas, 3 nights, at a 5-star hotel private jet, listed as a strategy conference." She looked directly at Crockett, her gaze unrelenting. Crockett leaned forward, her voice rising. "You're twisting the truth. That trip was approved. Nothing shady about it." Greene cut in, her tone soft but sharp. "I have the flight logs. Jasmine want me to read them." Tension surged. Committee members shifted uncomfortably. One coughed softly. Even the chairman watched Greene closely. Lips pursed, unsure how far this would go. Greene glanced at the documents, but didn't read immediately. Instead, she said, her voice low but firm, "If the American people are footing the bill for lavish trips, serving personal interests, they deserve to know. And if someone is lying about how their money is used, we have a duty to speak up." Crockett snapped back. "You're playing dirty politics. Woo had moed. This is a witch hunt." Crockett yelled, "Then you shouldn't fear the truth. Greene replied, her voice ice cold. What had just unfolded was merely the opening act the hearing room was taught as a bowstring. But as Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene turned to the next page of her documents, it felt like someone had lit a match in a room full of gas. She didn't rush to speak, letting the silence do the talking. Then she looked up, her eyes sharp, and declared, "This isn't just about campaign funds or trips. This is about integrity." She continued, her voice steady but forceful. "This is about what people say behind closed doors when they think no one's listening, and I have recordings." The word recordings hit like a punch, Jasmine. Crockett clenched her jaw, her eyes blazing. "What recordings?" she demanded, leaning forward. "The calls." Greene replied, her tone calm. "One from last spring, one from the summer, both involving the transfer of political funds to personal interests." Crockett nearly shouted, "You're making this up." But Greene didn't stop. She pulled out a printout and slid it toward the committee clerk for the record. "I request this document be entered into the hearing. Minutes, the recordings have been verified by 2 independent sources before I presented them." Crockett was now visibly angry, her eyes darting around, but no one spoke in her defense. In the back row, a reporter whispered to a colleague, "My God." Reaching for their phone, Greene continued, her voice unwavering. In the spring call, an aide to Miss Crockett mentioned transferring $15,000 from the Liberty Forward Fund to a personal account registered under a Texas LLC owned by her cousin. She paused, letting the information sink in. When asked why, the aide responded, "Needed money to fix the house in Dallas. She's waiting on contractors." The room went dead silent. Even the chairman didn't bang the gavel. Crockett shot up, her face flushed. "This is slander. I don't have a cousin who owns that company." Greene held up another sheet, her voice still calm. "His name is Marcus Tate, married to your husband's sister, LaToya. Records show Horizon Ventures was formed 3 months before the transfer. I have the Texas business registration here." The room didn't just stir. It erupted. One of Crockett's aides quietly slipped out the sidewall. Another typed frantically on their phone, hands shaking. Crockett pointed at Greene, her voice trembling with rage. "You're a liar, a media-hungry fraud." Greene merely raised an eyebrow, her tone icy. Then why did the bank flag the transaction? Why was there a note about a fraud investigation opened, then quietly closed after 2 weeks with no public record? She leaned back, eyes locked on Crockett. "Because you thought no one would notice. But I did." The cameras kept rolling, capturing every second. The chairman spoke, his voice hesitant. "We need a 5-minute recess." "No need," Greene said instantly, her voice sharp as a blade. "I'm not done." And with that, she seized control again. In the summer call, "It's Liberty Forward, again, another shell company this time, a $40,000 consulting fee listed as security services, but the person on the other end, a developer." In Houston, confirmed they never met, never spoke, and had no contract. The chairman opened his mouth, about to object, but found no words. Greene turned to him, her voice low but firm. "Sir, these aren't baseless accusations. These are documented transactions. We sit here claiming to represent the people. But if we won't investigate ourselves, what are we doing?" She stood scanning the room, letting the question hang. Crockett was now silent, her face beet red, hands no longer trembling but rigid on the table. Outside the hearing room, reporters were already drafting headlines, text crawling across screens. But Greene wasn't just exposing misconduct. She was igniting a political firestorm. The hearing room was no longer the same. The air felt oxygen-starved. Stifling and heavy, Jasmine Crockett leaned back in her chair, arms tightly crossed, lips pursed as if swallowing her rage. She wasn't used to being cornered, especially not on camera, not in front of the nation representative, Marjorie Greene. With piercing eyes, picked up a thinner stack of documents, the cover labeled personal travel expenses. She looked straight at Crockett, her voice calm but ice-cold. "Let's talk about the trips. See, she declared, the ones listed as strategy conferences but tied to private donors, real estate brokers, and oddly enough tech investors in San Antonio, Texas. This new accusation was like a darker hidden corner, not just about campaign funds or financial misconduct, but something murkier, deeper. Crockett shook her head, letting out a scornful laugh. "Tech? Are you serious?" Greene shot back, her voice steady. "I'm very serious, because I don't think the American people want their officials vacationing at the Alamo Palace Hotel paid for by unregistered lobbyists, calling it research." She flipped to a page in the documents. "Last spring, you were flown to San Antonio on a private jet tail number N72KL. The plane is owned by Starlight Ventures, operated by a man named Gerald Voss, currently under IRS investigation for international wire fraud." The name Voss was a bombshell. The audience in the room murmured, phones were pulled out, pens scratched furiously. "You stayed 3 nights in a luxury condo." Greene continued tapping the paper lightly. "I have the invoice here, fully paid by Starlight, but it never appeared in your financial disclosures, not once." Crockett's face twitched. "I don't have to disclose," she argued, her voice shrill. "They invited me to stay. I didn't pay." Greene nodded, her tone cold. "Exactly. And that's the problem. Accepting unreported gifts from individuals under federal investigation while sitting on the oversight committee isn't just shady, it's unethical, possibly illegal." The chairman looked up from his notes, but didn't interrupt. No one did. Greene turned another page. The following summer in Galveston, Texas. Another private flight, this time tied to a group of donors connected to Gulfstream Tech, a Houston-based tech company. 2 of those donors have pending litigation before the Technology and Innovation Subcommittee. The accusation hit harder. Crockett shot to her feet, her voice trembling. "Stop it. You're twisting everything. You know how it works. We get invited. We show up. It's normal." Greene raised her hand, a gentle but firm gesture. "Not invitations. A pattern? Same names, same planes, same hotels, and no disclosures." She stepped away from the microphone, slowly walking in front of the podium, her voice softening, not weak, but deeply personal. "Let me ask you," Representative Greene paused, looking directly at Crockett. "Why did you meet Victor Hensley, Gulfstream Tech CEO, 3 weeks after voting against the Tech Transparency Act? That vote blocked an amendment restricting tax breaks for companies like..." His rocket blinked, her voice halting. "I didn't meet him." Greene responded, her tone calm. "You were photographed with him on the Seaside Haven Hotel rooftop." The photo was posted, then deleted. The committee clerk slid a print out across the table. The image was clear: Crockett wearing sunglasses, smiling brightly, next to a man holding a drink wearing a name tag reading Victor H. The photo spread through the room like wildfire. "You didn't know the cameras were watching," Greene added, "but the internet never forgets." Representative Jasmine Crockett was not one to back down. She had built her reputation on confrontation, fierce rhetoric, and an unyielding demeanor stronger than anyone in the hearing room. But, now seated at the witness table surrounded by evidence camera lights and a stunned committee, her usual fire was barely flickering. The collapse began slowly, not loudly, but but quietly, like a crack spreading wide. It started with her fingers tapping relentlessly on the table, then her eyes darting quickly from face to face, searching for someone to stand up and save her. But no one did not. This time, then she erupted. "This is a damn setup!" Crockett shouted, standing so fast, her chair scraped loudly. "Across the floor, this entire hearing is just a smear job." She pointed a trembling finger at Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, her voice roaring, "Where's the due process?" The chairman tried to interject. "Representative Crockett, please," but she cut him off. "No, I'm not going to sit here while some political hack reads lies from who knows where." The room fell silent. The air, heavy Greene, standing firm at the podium, slowly raised her eyes. "I've provided names, records, documents, photos. Nothing. Here is speculation," she said, her voice calm but razor-sharp. "You just don't like looking in the mirror." "Do you?" Crockett hissed. "You're crossing the line." Greene replied, her tone icy. "No, I'm standing in the right place, and I'm not budging." The way Greene spoke, controlled, deliberate, wasn't the more dangerous, authentic, credible. The kind of tone that cut through every screen across the country. An aide tried to hand Crockett a note, but she swatted it away. "Why don't you talk about your donors?" Crockett shouted, her voice shaking with rage. "Talk about the shady money behind your campaign. You think you're clean playing the hero?" Greene tilted her head, unshaken. "I'm not here to perform," she replied. "I'm here to ask questions. The American people deserve answers to. Every time you yell, every time you deflect, you only prove why those answers matter." The chairman tried again. "Let's restore order." But Crockett wasn't done. "You want drama, here it is," she bellowed. "I have nothing to hide, unlike you. People smiling for the cameras and lying behind their backs." Greene tilted her head slightly, then said, her voice low but sharp, "Then explain the third account in your name. Under Texas. Coastal Ventures, LLC, tied to a short-term rental property in Houston, receiving multiple payments from political funds. After you voted against rental regulation reform, the statement landed like a brick. Crockett didn't respond. Silence, unlike before, when she shouted and fought back. Now she looked uncertain, exhausted, exposed. The cameras didn't miss a second. Outside the hearing room, the story had exploded. Cable news channels interrupted their programming. Clips of the hearing went viral. Before Greene even sat down, viewers weren't just watching. They were dissecting. Some cheered, others panicked, a few didn't know what to believe. But no one could look away. Inside, Crockett's collapse didn't just expose her vulnerabilities, it shifted the dynamics. What started as a spat now felt like a real investigation committee. Members were no longer spectators. They began to look nervous. Genuinely nervous. Marjorie Taylor Greene didn't rush. She calmly gathered her documents, ignoring the noise, the furtive glances, and 3 different aides asking if she'd take interviews in the hallway. She answered them, all with one word: not yet. In the hallway, Representative Jasmine Crockett was striding. No cameras, just her voice, and she was using it fiercely. "They can't let some freshman congresswoman come in here and try to smear me," she snapped at her aide, a man in his 30s, sharp-eyed, clutching his phone tightly. "This whole thing is a setup. Who's behind her? I want names." The aide nodded quickly. "We're trying to control the narrative. We've got a statement. Ready. Blaming politicization. Deep state tactics. The usual. Release it now? Or wait?" Crockett cut him off, her tone blunt now, "and tell the conservative network I'll go on tonight. 10 minutes. no fluff around the corner of the hallway. Greene quietly passed a group of staffers, all of whom stopped whispering. When she appeared, she didn't look at anyone except for a young black intern, maybe 19 or 20, who gave her a look that wasn't just admiration, but gratitude. Greene smiled faintly, then kept walking 2 floors up in a quiet hallway. Representative Tran, a moderate from Texas, was on the phone with his chief of staff. "We need to keep our distance," he said firmly. "I don't care how big she is with the loyal base, this is about to blow up. Do you think those documents are real?" The voice on the other end asked. She presented them too smoothly. Min replied, "That wasn't theater, that was strategy." Outside along Liberty Avenue, reporters lined up cameras everywhere, mics pinned to lapels. A VTV reporter was rehearsing, while a producer counted down from 10. Everyone wanted a piece of the story. In a side meeting room, Crockett sat with her communications director and a lawyer. Her voice was different now, less explosive, more calculated. "What's the worst-case scenario?" she asked, eyes fixed on the table. The lawyer, an older man with salt and pepper whiskers, cleared his throat. "If Greene's documents are real, and she pushes for a formal ethics investigation, we could face a reprimand. Or worse, the financial issues alone could escalate. Thigh violations, IRS red flags, even DOJ if they want to poke around." Crockett didn't speak, just stared. "What about public opinion?" the communications director asked. "We'll hold the loyal base." Crockett replied, "They don't care about fun names or plain numbers. They want me to fight." The lawyer looked at her. "They do, until it looks like you lied." In a small office behind the hearing room, Greene sat with her chief of staff sipping cold coffee. "They'll say, 'This is a take-on.'" The aide said, "Call you a puppet, a tool." "The works?" Greene smiled, but the smile carried some weight. "Let them say what they want." She replied, "But when I look into the eyes of the folks back home, I'll know one thing for sure." "What's that?" the aide asked. "I told the truth, and I have the proof." Truth was Greene's shield, but Crockett was already planning a counterattack, and she wasn't going to play by the rules. When the hearing resumed the next day, everything had changed. It was no longer a routine congressional session. It had become a full-blown spectacle. Satellite news trucks lined the street. Networks switched their tickers to bold red with courtroom drama headlines. Crockett under fire, Greene lands, heavy blows, all lies inside the building. The committee room was packed an hour early. Reporters, shoulder-tosh, shoulder fingers flying across keyboards. Members who usually arrived late showed up early. Faces, blank phones gripped tightly. Marjorie Taylor, Greene, walked in quietly, a hard-covered document folder under her arm, her calmness unnerving those around her. Crockett hadn't spoken publicly since her collapse, but today she wore a sharp suit, fresh makeup, and a cold, calculated expression. Clearly prepared, Greene wasted no time standing up her voice, calm but weighty. "Yesterday, I presented evidence of campaign fund violations and undisclosed gifts." She said, her eyes sweeping the hearing room. "But there's one more document I was waiting to verify. I have it now. And I believe the committee and the public deserve to see it." She placed the hardcover folder on the table, opening it with deliberate care. "This is a draft agreement between Representative Jasmine Crockett and a Texas investment group, Lonier Capital." A murmur rose even from committee members. Greene held up the first page, the bold title bearing Crockett's name and Lonier Capital. "This document requests that Miss Crockett repeatedly advocate for deregulation measures in exchange for undisclosed financial stakes in a subsidiary, specifically Coastal Energy Solutions. a company with extensive oil and gas operations in the South. Crockett shot up, her face pale. "That's forged. That signature isn't mine," she shouted. Her voice breaking. Greene didn't blink. "We had an independent handwriting analyst review it," she replied, her tone ice cold. "The signature matches 5 other documents filed with the Texas Secretary of State from the back row." A reporter whispered, "She's done." But Greene wasn't finished. "This agreement was never disclosed, and the bill you introduced to reduce capital gains taxes for energy companies didn't pass," she said, "but that doesn't change its nature. A deal trading influence." For personal gain, silence fell, not out of reverence, but the kind where no one knows what to say next. Crockett's lawyer whispered in her ear, and she flinched, visibly panicked. "You don't know what you're doing," Crockett muttered, her voice trembling. "You're burning the whole house down just to make headlines, aren't you?" Greene responded, her tone calm. "No, for accountability." The chairman leaned forward. "Representative Greene, are you formally requesting this document be referred to the House Ethics Committee?" Greene nodded yes, along with the full accompanying record, uploaded to a secure congressional server, and provided to every committee member. The clerk stepped forward to collect the folder. Camera shutters clicking outside the room, live viewers reacted instantly. Comments flooding social media by the thousands. Even conservative TV pundits struggled to defend Crockett without sounding absurd. In the room, Crockett sat down slowly, hands, still face expressionless, but something had shifted in her, not just frustration or anger, but the realization that this was no longer just a hearing. It was a legal threat, a career threat. And worst of all, she didn't know what else Greene had. Greene had made her point, and the question now was whether the system would act or just watch by mid-afternoon. Headlines were everywhere. No matter the channel, VTV News Channel, or local stations in Houston, Austin, Corpus Christi. They all covered it. People weren't just watching the hearing. They debated in diners, whispered in churches, discussed at office. Lunch tables, social media exploded. Hashtag spreading fast on YouTube. The hearing video surpassed 2 million views in hours. A 10-second clip of Crockett slamming the table was posted with the caption, "When evidence hits harder than words, it went viral." Chadid. After the final document, Jasmine Crockett had tried shouting in protest, but this time it fell flat. "She can yell all she wants," someone whispered in a Waco diner, but it doesn't change a thing. It was a rare moment, cutting through every media. Filter striking straight at public sentiment, there was something deeply real about it. Crockett's collapse wasn't just a story, it was an event that gripped the nation, and Marjorie Taylor Greene became a household name overnight. Videos of Greene's composure spread like wildfire. A social media post read, "If calm under pressure had a face, it's Marjorie Taylor Greene." A remix turned her line, "I told the truth, and I have proof," into a chorus over a bass beat. Teenagers who didn't even know what a House hearing was suddenly quoted her in videos. Cable networks couldn't keep up. Some pundits tried spinning it as a partisan fight, but viewers weren't buying it. The evidence was too specific, the documents too solid, and Crockett's silence said it all. Even Crockett's staunchest supporters began to waver at a community meeting in Locke, Texas. A woman in a Crockett t-shirt stood up asking a question that caught the local congressman off guard. Why isn't anyone talking about that political fund money? If it's fake, she'd be shouting denials, but she's not saying anything. Radio stations were flooded with callers. Some still defended Crockett, but many didn't. "She fought for us," a caller from Amarillo said. But now it looks like she's just fighting for herself. Online conservative influencers hesitated. Some tried digging into Greene, pulling up old posts, past statements, but nothing stuck. Greene didn't yell, didn't play dirty, just presented documents and stood firm. Attacks bounced off her like rubber bullets. Meanwhile, congressional offices were swamped with calls, some demanding Crockett's resignation, others calling for investigations, a few just wanting clarity. The Speaker's office declined to comment, but insider leaks suggested a closed-door discussion had taken place, with whispers of potential reprimands or worse through it all. Greene stayed, silent, no theatrics, no chasing the media, just a short post on her congressional page, thanking constituents and reaffirming her commitment to transparency. That silence echoed louder than a dozen interviews while Crockett's team scrambled to clean up the wreckage. Greene didn't need to say more. The public was already writing the rest of the story, but the bigger the reaction, the heavier the pressure on those with the power to act. By day 3, Crockett's office resembled a fortress more than a workplace, blinds drawn, phones ringing, non-stop, staff whispering in corners. The chief of staff, eyes red from lack of sleep, stood at the photocopier, slamming the button like it owed him money. "Is she coming in?" an aide asked quietly. "Still in. A meeting," another replied on the phone with the lawyer again. In the meeting room, Crockett sat hunched over the phone, surrounded by papers, half-drunk coffee cups, and 3 people looking as exhausted as she did. "She's not backing down," the lawyer said. "Greene's got the upper hand. No leaks, no reckless statements, just evidence that's dangerous." Crockett rubbed her forehead. "So what do I do?" The lawyer answered bluntly. "Don't resign, but stop going on air. Every time you talk, you bleed. We need a carefully worded statement." Crockett shook her head. "I don't do?" "Careful you do now," he said curtly. At the congressional cafeteria, 2 aides from different offices exchanged glances over their trays. "She's always loud." One said, "Now she's quiet." That's the sign it's real. Meanwhile, Greene's team was swamped with calls from reporters, officials, even former lawmakers. Some congratulated, others offered support. A few were cautious, fearing the wind might shift, but Greene didn't care. She's focused on the fight ahead. She didn't celebrate the win or gloat. On Friday, she returned to her district office in Houston, attending a meeting on housing complaints with a group of elderly residents. "Aren't you tired?" an aide asked quietly after the meeting. Greene gave a faint smile. "I'm always tired, but I'm not done." Meanwhile, in Washington, things moved fast. A bipartisan group in the House committee began reviewing Greene's documents, not a full investigation yet, but a first step, the kind that usually takes months. This time took days. Jasmine, Crockett's allies, started peeling away. Some issued vague statements saying the process should play out. Others outright dodged reporters. Only a few diehards still shouted online, calling Greene a pawn and claiming the documents were faked, though no one could debunk the evidence. By the next week, 3 Republicans quietly requested an internal ethics review. This was no small move. It signaled that even Crockett's own party wasn't ready to blindly defend her anymore. 2 days later, Crockett released a written statement. No apology, no admission, just accusing Greene of politicizing the process to smear true patriots. But the narrative had shifted. Newsrooms across the country ran pieces on transparency, accountability, and the importance of integrity in Crockett's district. A local poll showed her approval rating dropped 20 points in a single week. 20 points at a club in Austin, Texas. A former donor stood up, telling the room, "I don't care what party she's in. If she lies to the people and gets caught, she doesn't." deserve to represent them. Chut. The fallout wasn't just political. It was personal. Crockett's staff considered quitting, donors stopped answering calls. Lobbyists suddenly got busy. Meanwhile, Greene stayed focused. She kept working, answering emails, not tearing down her opponent with insults or games. She did it with paperwork, composure, and truth. The nation noticed, but the real test wasn't what happened to Crockett. It was what Congress and the voters would do next. By the end of the month, the headlines slowed, but the questions remained sharp, clearer than ever. The nation had witnessed something rare, evidence presented with discipline. No theatrics, no retractions. For once, a political moment felt honest in interviews from coast to coast. People echoed one thing she didn't. Yell, didn't insult, just showed the proof at a community center. In El Paso, Texas, a pastor told his congregation during Sunday service, "Integrity is quiet, noise isn't always right, and truth doesn't need to shout." Greene didn't care about becoming a media star. She didn't hire a new PR team or take every TV. Instead, she chose a short interview with a local Houston reporter. The conversation was calm, focused. "Did you want this to be a takedown?" The reporter asked, "No." Greene answered bluntly, "I wanted people to see what happens when you follow the trail. I wanted them to understand that real power doesn't come from shouting, but from preparation." The reporter nodded. "Are you worried about retaliation?" "I know it's possible," Greene said, "but I'm not worried. I didn't do this to win a fight. I did it because the people deserve better than smoke and mirrors." Her words echoed in Washington. The House Ethics Committee quietly opened a formal investigation into Crockett's campaign finances. No press conference, just a simple statement that her records were under review. The move was small but weighty, marking a turning point in the battle Greene had started with truth and evidence for Jasmine Crockett. The storm didn't fade, it just moved inward, simmering and stifling. Legal advisors worked non-stop, staff quit one by one. Travel plans were slashed once a regular on every evening show. Crockett now declined interviews. No more sound bites for the press, just silence and strategy. Meanwhile, Marjorie Taylor Greene's reputation grew louder. She was invited to speak at major universities, University of Texas, at Austin Prairie View A&M Rice. University not as a hero, but as a voice of reason, Greene's message stayed consistent. Don't mistake noise for rightness. Do your homework, and never walk into a room afraid of the truth. High school students wrote her letters. Young women shared how they felt, inspired seeing someone like them stand up, fold her in hand, exposing lies. Voters said they felt heard, as if someone finally said out loud what they'd long thought. Politics doesn't have to be a circus, and maybe, just maybe, truth still matters. One evening, Greene was invited to speak at a community meeting in Houston, Texas. The hall was packed, standing room only. No campaign signs, no slogans, just residents, black, white, Latino, young and old, waiting to hear from the woman who faced down one of Congress's loudest voices. Without flinching, she stepped to the mic, scanning the room. "I'm not here to talk about scandal or headlines," she said, her voice low but clear. "I'm here to talk about what's next. Because what happened in that hearing room isn't just about one person. It's about what we tolerate in politics, and whether we still care enough to stop and ask, is this honest? Is this fair? Is this who we want to be?" She let the silence linger, then continued. "Power without truth is just noise, and we've had enough noise." The room erupted not in anger or chaos, but in slow, steady applause from people who felt someone finally spoke their language that night back home. Greene sat alone at her kitchen table. The hearing documents were still in her bag. She didn't open them. She didn't need to. She knew what they held. And more importantly, now, the nation did too. Truth, when spoken clearly and fearlessly, doesn't just win arguments. It changes culture. Greene's story wasn't just a political victory, it was proof that honesty backed by evidence can reshape how people view politics. While Crockett had retreated her, team grappling with press calls and voter pressure, Greene kept working. She answered emails, met with constituents, and prepared for the next sessions as if the hearing was just another day on the job. But the hearing's impact rippled community groups. In Texas, held discussions using Greene's story as an example of accountability. Teachers in Houston High School started showing the hearing video in class, teaching students about ethics and transparency. A 16-year-old girl in Corpus Christi wrote to Greene, saying she inspired her to consider a career in law. "I want to be like you," she wrote, not afraid to stand up, but doing it with truth. Meanwhile, in Washington, the pressure on Crockett didn't let up. Old allies kept their distance, and even her former supporters started asking questions. A social media post from an Austin voter read, "If she's innocent, why not show proof? Silence isn't an answer." Hashtags kept spreading, reflecting division, but also a public hunger for transparency. Greene, in her calmness, became a symbol of a different kind of politics, one rooted in truth over performance. The story of Marjorie Taylor Greene's confrontation with Jasmine Crockett in the hearing reflects the tensions and expectations in American politics. Today, where transparency and accountability are becoming the public's focus, Greene's use of detailed evidence from call recordings, flight invoices, to a secret agreement with Lonier Capital to expose Crockett's financial misconduct shows the power of truth when presented with discipline and concrete proof. Conversely, Crockett's collapse from angry outbursts to helpless silence illustrates the consequences of lacking transparency and being unprepared for public scrutiny in today's America, where social media and news amplify every move. This story underscores that people increasingly demand honesty from their leaders, as seen in the hashtags and community discussions in Houston, Austin. Practical lesson in life, whether at work, in the community, or at home, honesty and thorough preparation are key to building trust. Learn from Greene, who took the time to verify documents and present them without shouting or personal attacks, like when she calmly countered Crockett's anger with, "I have evidence, not rumors." Don't be like Crockett, who let emotions take over and failed to provide counter-evidence, losing the trust of voters and allies. Be like the student in Corpus Christi, inspired by Greene to pursue truth, and like the Houston residents questioning the honesty of leaders in a polarized society. Truth backed by evidence doesn't just resolve conflicts, it inspires positive change. Subscribe to follow stories of truth and accountability, like Marjorie Taylor Greene's journey, and thank you for joining us. See you in the next video. Don't miss out, because we'll keep exploring the moments shaping American politics.